At my promotion party, my wife raised her glass and said loudly, to my husband, the biggest loser I've ever known. The laughter was deafening, but what she didn't know was that I had already planned my exit. The revenge that followed left her jobless, homeless, and alone. Chapter 1. The toast that shattered everything. I remember the moment vividly. The hum of clinking glasses, murmurs of small talk, the faint notes of jazz in the background, and the faint scent of roasted lamb and lavender from the floral centerpieces. It was supposed to be the proudest night of my life. A private rooftop dinner in a high-rise downtown, a celebration for my long-overdue promotion to regional director after 12 years of grinding. The company had pulled out all the stops. My boss had even flown in from Boston. My team, my friends, and my wife, Danielle, were all there, or so I thought. Danielle looked breathtaking, dressed in a satin emerald gown that hugged her perfectly. She always knew how to command attention, and that night was no different. But I should have known. The way she glanced at her phone, the way she barely smiled at my jokes. Something had been off for weeks. Still, I pushed those thoughts aside. This night was about celebrating. I'd worked double shifts, sacrificed weekends, and taken on projects no one else wanted, all to climb the corporate ladder. I did it for us, for our future, for her. When the waiter uncorked the champagne and poured it into crystal flutes, Danielle stood up with a gleam in her eye and said, "Everyone, may I have your attention for a moment?" I leaned back, expecting a sweet toast, maybe even an, "I'm proud of you, babe." What came next felt like a knife to the chest. She raised her glass and declared loudly, too loudly, with a smirk that didn't belong to a loving wife. To my husband, the biggest loser I've ever known. I mean 12 years for one promotion. Slow and steady wins the race, huh? The rooftop fell silent. A few nervous laughs erupted. Some thought it was a joke. Some didn't know how to react. I sat frozen, my smile stuck halfway between confusion and heartbreak. She took a sip of champagne, leaned into her chair, and looked at me with an icy smile like she'd won something. She hadn't. Because what she didn't know was that I had seen the bank transfers 2 weeks ago, the ones she thought she'd hidden. I had read the texts she forgot to delete. I knew about the men from her gym, and the messages they shared mocking me. And more importantly, I had already prepared my exit. I just hadn't expected her to be so bold, or so cruel, in public. I smiled politely, swallowed every emotion boiling inside, and nodded in front of everyone. "Thank you for that, Danielle," I said, raising my glass. "It's good to know where I stand." That moment was the last time anyone saw me as just the loser husband. Because starting that night, I began the final phase of the plan I had already set in motion. Chapter 2. The calm before the storm. I didn't sleep that night. Danielle had driven home separately from the rooftop party, claiming she had plans with friends afterward. More likely, she was with him. Her secret gym-toned lover. She didn't even bother texting me to ask how I was after publicly humiliating me in front of colleagues and friends. But that was fine. Because while she was busy entertaining her ego, I was sitting in my office, sipping scotch, and finalizing the last steps of my plan. The one I had quietly set in motion weeks earlier, the moment I saw the first signs of betrayal. See, Danielle thought she had me fooled. That I was just a pathetic corporate ladder climber, too dull and desperate to see the obvious. But what she didn't know was, I was never that naive. I just gave people too much benefit of the doubt, until they made me regret it. And Danielle? She crossed the line. It started small. Her phone always face down. Sudden trips to the gym that never matched her workout schedule. Texts at 1 a.m. with a coy smile as she'd say, "Just my cousin being dramatic." Then came the money transfers. I noticed a strange pattern while updating our shared finances. Small ATM withdrawals from random places, sometimes 2 hours apart. Once I followed the GPS tracking on our shared Tesla app. She had said she was at brunch with her sister. But the car had parked outside a boutique hotel across town. She didn't even bother deleting the history. That night, instead of confronting her, I began collecting evidence. Photos, transaction screenshots, text messages she thought I'd never find. I even visited a private investigator. Quietly. Discreetly. I wasn't going to act until I had all the leverage. I wasn't going to confront her with emotion. I was going to end this with precision. Over the next 2 weeks, I made changes. I transferred my personal savings, over $80,000, into a private account she didn't know about. I had my lawyer draft divorce papers with a clause voiding spousal support in cases of infidelity, backed by evidence I now possessed. I froze the equity access on our home, where I was the sole mortgage holder. I contacted her employer, anonymously, and provided a flash drive. The contents were damaging enough to ruin both her reputation and her budding affair with the head of marketing. Yes, that's who he was. Her new gym friend. And I booked a quiet Airbnb under a fake name. My future escape plan. I even changed the passwords to all streaming platforms and banking apps that weekend. Petty. Maybe. But satisfying. Absolutely. Danielle came home around midnight after the promotion party. She didn't even ask how I was. Just went to the kitchen, poured herself wine, and muttered, "Don't take it so seriously. It was just a joke." I nodded, smiled, and said, "Of course. I'm not upset. Actually, I've never been more clear." She looked confused, but dismissed it. She had no idea the storm that was coming. Because her toast was the final straw. The confirmation that she not only betrayed me, but had mocked the years I had sacrificed for her. For us. She thought she was in control. But the truth was, she had already lost everything. Chapter 3. Let the games begin. The Monday after the party, Danielle acted as if nothing happened. She waltzed into the kitchen wearing my hoodie, the one she always pretended was hers now, humming to herself, pouring oat milk into her imported coffee blend like she hadn't just detonated our marriage days earlier with one champagne-soaked toast. "Big day, huh?" she said, kissing me on the cheek. "You'll be the talk of the office." I smiled and replied, "Oh, I'm counting on it." At 9:17 a.m., an email blast hit the inboxes of every senior member of her firm. Subject line, urgent. Conflict of interest. Documentation attached. Inside was a professionally crafted PDF, anonymously submitted, detailing the timeline of her affair with their director of marketing, cross-referenced against major contract approvals that conveniently followed every trip they took together. Every date, every hotel, every gift. I had assembled it like a prosecutor preparing for court. Danielle's company had a strict no fraternization clause between executives. She had signed it during onboarding. She probably didn't even remember it, but HR would. By noon, her company laptop was locked remotely. Her key card was disabled. She came home fuming. "They're investigating me," she shouted. I just raised an eyebrow and said, "That's wild. Must be a misunderstanding." Later that week, while she sulked around the house, suspicious and increasingly erratic, I enacted phase 2. I walked into the bank and revoked her access to our joint account. The teller handed me a confirmation slip, nodding. The power of being the primary account holder was a beautiful thing. Then came the house. While she was out job hunting, probably calling her affair partner in panic, I met with my real estate attorney. Turns out, she never bothered to get her name added to the deed. The house, legally mine, mortgage in my name only. The very next morning, I filed the notice of eviction. I gave her 30 days, generous, considering the circumstances. But the kicker, I had already secured a buyer, quietly, discreetly, all cash. Friday evening, she stormed into the house with 2 suitcases. "I'm staying at Qley's until this blows over," she said. "But when I come back, we need to talk about finances. I deserve half of everything." I nodded slowly, then handed her a thick envelope. She opened it, confused, and paled as she saw the first page. A full dossier of her affair, printed, time-stamped, backed with digital evidence and witness statements, including testimony from hotel staff and screenshots of explicit messages. "I'm filing for divorce," I said calmly. "Irreconcilable differences and adultery." She dropped the folder, her voice cracked. "You've been planning this." "For a while now," I said. "You gave the first toast. I'll give the final one." Chapter 4, The Public Fall and the Final Curtain. Danielle always believed she could manipulate the narrative. Even after receiving divorce papers, losing her job and realizing the house wasn't legally hers, she still walked around like she had a backup plan. Like life owed her something. And in her mind, reputation was everything. So I made sure that would be the final thing to crumble. 2 weeks later, her son, my stepson Kyle, was graduating from college. I had paid for every dollar of it, tuition, books, off-campus housing, and even the suit he was wearing for the ceremony. She invited me reluctantly, perhaps thinking it was a gesture of grace. I accepted. The graduation was held in a large auditorium. Hundreds of parents, cameras flashing, pride in the air. Qley had been chosen to give the student speech. He stood at the podium and began confidently. I want to thank my mother, who raised me strong, and my real father, who's always been there. He glanced briefly in my direction. Not a word. Not a mention. Danielle turned and smiled smugly, as if to say, "See. You're nothing." I sat there quietly, still, waiting. When the ceremony ended, there was a small private reception for select families, champagne, hors d'oeuvres, and clinking glasses. I approached Qley and said, "Congratulations." He gave a half-hearted nod and said, "Thanks. And thanks for helping out, I guess." I smiled and handed him a sealed manila envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "Something your real dad left behind," I said, turning away. Confused, he opened it. Inside were court records, arrest logs, restraining orders, and unpaid child support documents totaling nearly $86,000, all under the name of his biological father, whom Danielle had lied about for years. There was also a printed summary of how I had paid for every semester, every internship stipend, and his final year abroad in Japan, all itemized with bank statements. And lastly, a screenshot of the quote he had said to his friend, the one I overheard. "He's just mom's fool. My real dad's the one I'll thank at graduation." He froze. Danielle saw his expression shift. She rushed over. "Qley. What is it?" He turned to her, eyes full of betrayal. "You told me he abandoned us, that he was dead. You lied to me. And you let me disrespect the men who actually raised me." She stuttered. "I didn't think." He walked away, right there, in front of everyone. But it wasn't over. A week later, I released an anonymous blog post titled, "Behind the Toast, What My Wife Said After I Gave Her Everything." It detailed the betrayal at my promotion party, the affair, the financial record of my support, and the public slap in the face. The story went viral on LinkedIn and Reddit. People from her old firm commented with shock. Friends texted her in disbelief. And the final twist. I attached a short clip from the promotion party. The exact moment she raised her glass and called me the biggest loser she'd ever known. People were horrified. Comments poured in. "This woman doesn't deserve forgiveness. He played the long game and won." Her LinkedIn account vanished within days. Her reputation was scorched earth. Chapter 5, The Rise of the Loser. Weeks passed. I watched from a distance as Danielle tried desperately to piece her life back together. Jobless, abandoned by former colleagues, and distanced from her own son who had finally seen through the lies, she had no ground left to stand on. She moved out of the apartment I had leased under my name. The utilities were shut off after I revoked all authorizations. I never raised my voice, never made threats. I simply withdrew everything she had once taken for granted. After the divorce was finalized, I accepted a quiet position at a tech startup I had been advising on the side, a company I secretly co-founded under a different name. Turns out I didn't just plan my emotional exit from the marriage. I built my financial freedom, too. My promotion. Just a bonus. I bought a new house in the mountains. Minimalist, peaceful, no toasts, no pretending, just freedom and clarity. And as for the title of loser, I had been called worse. But now, that word had become a symbol, not of weakness, but of patience, of strategy, of silent strength. Danielle's new reality. Danielle tried reaching out, emails, voicemails, apologies filled with tears. She even showed up once at my new company's lobby, pleading, red-eyed, asking if we could talk just once. But she wasn't crying because she missed me. She was crying because she lost her comfort, her identity, her illusion of superiority. She never loved the men, only the benefits. And now that they were gone, so was she. Qley's letter. Months later, I received a letter in the mail from Qley. It read, "I was blind. I know now what you did for me, not just financially, but emotionally. I'm sorry I saw you as disposable. I hope one day I can earn the right to call you my dad again. I haven't replied yet. Some apologies take time. The lesson, revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's walking away while the world watches them collapse under the weight of their own actions." They laughed when she made that toast. They laughed when I sat there, silent. But no one's laughing now because the loser rose higher than they ever imagined and never had to push anyone down to get there. Was this revenge perfectly justified, or should the storm have raged harder? Drop your verdict below. I read every single one. Hit like if you crave justice and share this story with someone who needs its fire.